So guys, can we have a round of applause for Tom Harley of Harley Sons?
Thanks, guys.
Welcome, Tom. How are you doing?
Not too bad, mate. Yeah.
Good. So, can you just start us off? Tell us a little bit about Harley Sons, how you started out.
Yeah. So with me, it started, many years ago with myself and my three brothers, and my dad Bruce. So I guess my dad's been a plumber for 48 years, and I kind of grew up. It's kind of in my blood. Being a roof plumber, it might sound a little bit funny, but when we left high school, my dad always said, back then business, it's not what it is today. He said, don't become a plumber, go to university. And we all became plumbers the next, so there's five of us, we're a year apart, and we all become plumbers. We all kind of split off and did our own thing, and I was working for somebody else, as probably a lot of you do here, and you work for somebody else and you're always wanting more. My old boss would say, "Oh, just go and hide up there for the next 2 weeks. We don't have much work on," and I'd be, sitting under a platform, just thinking to myself, what else is out there? So I quit that job. Dad was working on his own then. He was just a sole trader, and then my other little brother came across, and I said to Dad, I want to start my own business. He said, "Well, come across with me, and we'll go from there." So I was working with them for probably 2 years. It was just my dad and another brother, and one of my other brothers, he had a company on the other side of town. And again, I got into that mindset of, this is crazy, 12-hour days. I was working for myself, but there had to be, something else that was out there for us, and it wasn't till I kind of started to reach out to other people I knew, they didn't even have their own business as accountants, friends I went to school with, and that's kind of when the doors, they started to open. It's what we need to know. It's not in here, it's out there, and that's kind of where we are. So
asking those questions initially, were you asking your dad a lot of questions? Was it a case of, right, he's giving you the skills from the the technical perspective, but were you learning business-wise off him as well?
Yeah, so 100% no. I definitely learned the skills off him. He's regarded as one of the most knowledgeable men in the industry, but when I went across to him, I didn't know what business was. I thought business was working as hard as you can, to invoice as much as you can, to put the money in the bank. It's actually when I started to reach out to people is when the doors just opened, and at the time there was three of us. My dad and my brother and myself. Once I started collecting this knowledge, after my first business coaching class, I went home and I sat in front of the computer for 3 hours and typed all this stuff up, and I thought, oh my God, what's all this information? 12 months down the track, we'd gone from 3 to 15 staff, and then we're doubling year on year. So yeah, it's pretty good.
And then so the brothers in the company as well, and were you logically dividing out who's responsible for what, or how did you, obviously you're the one that's taking the reins business-wise, but was it a case of anybody else wanting to kind of take those reins as well at the same time?
So I'm very lucky that I did have, trustworthy people in the business like my brothers, but that's definitely, all the ideas and the thirst for knowledge was from me, but having them, people you can trust in the business allowed me to kind of step back and say, hold on, I will take the hit financially, because if I'm not on the tools, obviously the business starts to slow down. So I stepped back, I started to work on the business, and that's when it started to open up. But to get back to your question, when I started to kind of really hone in, they looked at me like, you are the boss, and then, later down the track I did become the CEO.
So becoming the boss and taking that responsibility, what were some of the hard calls that you had to make in those early days?
There was a lot of hard calls, a lot of hard times. I'm not sure if you guys know kind of about that. There was in year 2, as a tradesman, you don't know anything about online marketing. You don't know anything about websites. I did reach out to a company that year who built us a website, and I think we burnt 90 grand in that year. It nearly sent the business bankrupt. Since then, the hard calls I have to make is, and I always stick by this, is that if you don't know much about something, you have to go out and learn it. So I'm a plumber, and I know more about digital marketing now than most people do. So I actually have an in-house digital marketing team and some staff in the Philippines who help us out with it. Next year, we're looking at saving to the last financial year like 250 grand on marketing because we do it ourselves now. So it's pretty good.
So then, you know, you've made that call about the website and the marketing that goes alongside that. What are the calls coming back from your brothers and your dad? What's their reaction at this stage?
Well, they just come along for the ride. You know, I kind of, you know, come to the table, our leadership meeting or directors alignment sessions with new ideas, and they just say, wow, you know, that's awesome, let's do it. You know, it's really me making the calls, but having them, you know, having kind of the family in the business. My mum works in the office too. Good family friends work in the office. Everybody, you know, believes in the values of the business, and that's kind of what's driving us forward. So,
does that make communication easier then? Would you say, you know, is the relationship still there on a family level, or is it all professional?
Yeah, great question. No, the relationship is still there. People always say, you know, don't work with family, don't work with friends. It's not like, it is very, very hard. We do have our moments, and it does put strain on the personal level. You know, you have a big argument in the office, and then that night you've got, you know, a family dinner on, and it does cause some strain, but we don't hold grudges. We move on. We talk it through, talk about the issues, as the guys, you know, previously said, and you move forward. You know, you can't hold grudges. So
yeah. So you're quite innovative in the space as well, and you have a lot of competitors that want a slice of that pie. How do you fend those off? You've started a new marketing agency as well. What are some of the steps you try and stay ahead of the curve?
Well, it was pretty easy being a tradie. I mean, I guess that most of you have had a tradesman out to your house. You know, they rock up late or don't rock up at all. They leave, you know, shit everywhere. That might sound like small things, but in a trade-based business, it means everything. So what we deliver is an amazing customer journey from start to finish. So from the sales, we educate the customer. We've got an awesome sales process to follow them up and keep them updated about when their job's coming in. You know, all the technology that goes with that, and then right down to, you know, automatic systems collecting Google reviews and stuff like that. And customers, you know, they turn around and say to us like, this is amazing. We've never had anything like this. And then they refer us to a friend, and, you know, the amount of referrals we get each week just proves that. So
just going back to that, you know, burning that 90 grand, I want to kind of feel like a little bit about what you were feeling at that time. What were your emotions when you're feeling that responsible and you've got all these staff members? How do you feel?
Yeah, well, you feel very responsible. Back then, we didn't have as many staff members. And back then I was pretty naive. You get into business and somebody kind of gives you their sales pitch, and you kind of believe it and you go with it. And you don't find out till a few months later that, you know, they don't deliver on the promise. Like business is about, if you promise a customer something, you deliver it and you go over and above their expectations, and that's not what happened. It caused huge strain. It was nearly a lawsuit, but I ended up getting a little bit of the money back. But that's in the past now, so thank God.
Yeah. And how do you mitigate against any of those decisions now? So do you have a sounding board of where you can bounce these ideas?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of the staff and the group we've built around us is just amazing. So we've got 10 in the leadership team in the office, and we weekly meet up for our weekly leadership meetings. We've got our directors alignment. That's purely because me and my brothers argue a lot, and we need that weekly session to kind of yell and scream at each other, you know, get it all out on the table and then move forward.
Yeah. So open communication. What are kind of some of the other values that you guys hold quite true to the business? Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, so the two values I will talk about is, one of them is we're different. We're different to all other trade-based businesses. We do rock up on time. We do the perfect job. Our customers are absolutely our number one priority at all times. And then number two is, you know, don't be a dickhead. So it is what it says. Just don't be a dickhead. So when you're bringing values into the business, your staff has to relate to them. You know, we come up with these ourselves. So don't be a dickhead just means that don't do something that you wouldn't do at your own house, you know, so it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah.
You threw me off a little bit. So in terms of kind of the future and what that holds for you guys, where do you see the business going? You talked a little bit about the marketing and bringing that in-house. What else do you have on the horizon?
So the future for us is, so we've got currently about 40 staff. We're thinking this time next year we'll have about 70. So we're growing at about 40% rate, but that's in Melbourne, in Victoria. That's before we break into other states. We are going to break into all the other states over the next probably 3 years once we get the model that we're running at the moment correct. We're just tweaking it and tweaking it. Now, whether that's a franchise model or we do it ourselves, but we will be nationwide. You know, starting out when my business coach used to say, you know, you might get to a $5 million turnover, I used to think that's not possible. You know, we're turning over 400,000, you know, 2.5, 3 years later, we're well over the $5 million mark, you know, trending towards $10 million. You know, hopefully there's a couple of million left in it for me, so.
Yeah, awesome. And if you were going back to your earlier days and when you're first starting out, what are these key bits of advice you would give yourself now?
As I touched on before, you know, it's great to see all you guys here reaching out, listening. These events, networking and meeting people, is what will progress you in your journey. Because as I mentioned before, the information's not here, it's out there. So once I started that, it was huge. Another thing which is very, very important, and it's only really come to me probably 6-12 months ago, is I had my values wrong. All my values were out of whack. It was business here. I would work 12 hours a day, not see my family and friends, and I'd burn myself out. So I've switched all that around now. So up the top is, it's got to be your personal health. You have to eat right, you have to exercise. Whatever that is for you, it has to be number one, because if it's not, you can't give the best you have to your business and your family. So for me, in order is, it's personal health, family and friends, and then business. And if it's not in that order, it throws everything out of whack. And that's been a huge turning point for me, to concentrate on myself and get in here right. So.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question about the old work-life balance conundrum. So,
yep.
And when you're feeling as though you're going out of sync, what do you do to realign yourself? What's the best practice there?
Look, what I used to do was, you know, when I wasn't working, I'd go out, you know, drinking and doing all that stuff for stress relief. But now, I'd exercise, you know, eat right, you know, hang out with friends, you know, friends and family. That's kind of, it lifts the spirits. It means so much for your mental state. Your mental state is probably the most important thing when you're trying to grow a business, because if it's not, you just can't get to where you're going to go to.
Do you ever take some time as well to maybe, you know, fully step back, but use that as a reflection time to think about where you can take the business? Do you ever dedicate a certain amount of time per week, or is it maybe less frequent than that?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I call it the hour of power. So once a week I'll spend 1 hour and I'll think big. You know, I'll sit back and I'll say, what is an idea I can bring to the table to triple the size of the business in the next 12 months? You know, and I like, you know, my directors and my partners, my brothers, Rob and Andy, to do the same. So you sit back and you say, what can we do that's just going to absolutely blow this out of the water? You know, most of it we don't actually bring to the table because it's crazy, but, you know, the hour of power, it works for us. So. Do
you do the hour of power together or separately and then bring it to the table if it's worth looking at?
Yeah, we definitely do it separately, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Guys, we're going to leave it there with Tom. We're going to delve back into Tom as well in a second for the Q&A, but can we have a round of applause for Tom Harley of Harley Sons? Thank you, Tom. Awesome. Good work, mate.